this is going to sound insane. Some of my lifts have actually gone down over the years. I'll say that again. Some of my lifts have actually gone down over the years. And you might be like, what the heck? That doesn't make any sense.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. I'm Courtney, and this is my brother, Paris. And Paris, because I'm your big sister, most of the time I'm cheering you on. Sometimes I'm,
Really?
making some jabs.
Because you're my big sister?
I mean, I'm cheering you on regardless, but I think
Yeah.
I cheer you on more than anyone else because I'm your big sister. I like to think that, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but notice that I saw you hit a major PR, I think last week. Last week, was it?
Yes, it was last week. That's true.
And it was your RDLs, right? Your Romanian deadlifts?
Yes. I can't even remember the exact, I think it was like 365 for 7 or something like that.
Holy smokes. 365 pounds.
Yeah, with a slight pause. Very slight pause. Yeah.
On a Romanian deadlift. This isn't conventional, people. This is
conventional is I could rip way more off the floor than that.
But we're talking Romanian deadlifts. So that's pretty heavy.
It was pretty heavy. I mean, it's all relative, but I'm like 182 pounds. So, I mean, at this body weight, it's not bad.
It's double.
Yeah.
Double body weight. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So when we think about that heaviness, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you hit a new load, heaviest RDL, does that mean you're automatically building more muscle or building muscle because you're starting to lift heavier and heavier?
Not automatically in my context because of other reasons. Yes.
Okay.
But it would give indication that most likely I am building new muscle tissue, which we'll get into. But if you were to just look at it as a single fact without knowing anything else, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're automatically building muscle.
Okay, so that just gives us today's question and the topic we're going to answer, which is, do you need to lift heavier to build muscle? If you have muscle growth goals or you want to make some gains, is lifting heavier the only thing you need to be focusing on? And if you're not lifting heavier, does that mean you can't build muscle? We're going to talk about this today. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we grow muscle and how that applies to progress in the gym, and a few variables that you should keep in mind alongside your heavy lifts and your loads and progressing the weights.
Cool.
Amazing. So let's kick things off with your quick answer to the question, which was no. The single fact that I'm lifting heavier alone does not mean I'm building more muscle. So why not? Why is that not the only thing that contributes to muscle growth?
There are other things that also need to be true for that to be indicative that we're most likely building muscle by getting stronger, right? Like the reason why for me, I know I'm most likely building muscle is because I know that my nutrition is in a slight surplus. I know I'm eating enough protein. I know I'm sleeping well. It's a rep range that's more hypertrophy focused. It's not a set of one. It's not a 1 rep max. And also I can see the performance improvements over time and my technique has stayed the same.
Right.
So given all those things, then we can say, okay, most likely me hitting PRs is indicative that I'm probably adding muscle tissue in those areas.
Mm-hmm. But what about if you had all those things in place anyways? Is just lifting heavier the only way to build muscle?
No, it's not the only way to build muscle. It's definitely a great way to build muscle if you have all those other boxes checked, for sure. And we do want to get stronger over time on average, right? But it's not the only way to build muscle. Definitely not.
Okay. And the overarching way that we build muscle is we are provoking an adaptation. We are asking our body to change. We are saying, hey, you over there, grow some muscle in this spot, this muscle group, this one. Yeah. And provoking an adaptation requires continuous signaling to your body and then also continuing to adapt to that adaptation, right?
Exactly.
Which gives us a concept that we're going to explore, which is kind of the root of answering this question, and that is progressive overload. Progressive overload, load is in there, so yes, your weight is one way we can achieve it. But let's first define what is progressive overload. How does it relate to that adaptation and growing muscle? And then what are the different ways that we can actually achieve progressive overload, not just through adding weight to the bar?
Yeah. I'm going to try to explain this in a simple way, but this gets confused a lot, I would say. So people think progressive overload is I have to add reps or weight or improve technique in order to make gains. But it's actually, I have the ability to add reps, weight, or improve technique because of the
Mm-hmm.
adaptations I've gained from previous sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not I am doing this so that I can. It's I can do this because of.
So it's kind of like an inverse of it's cause and effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we see progressive overload, it's a way that we're actually that progress, that progressive component, which is progress on reps, weight, technique, any improvement you make in the gym counts as progress in that sense. And that progress comes from the fact that you have made those adaptations. It's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
saying let's force the progress to tell our body to adapt.
Exactly. Exactly. It's kind of like, yeah, the previous stimuli that we've been giving our body then went to work to adapt to that, and then it allows us to then perform better.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we don't need to be lifting heavy over time, but we do need a progressive stimulus. So
Mm.
the stimulus that our muscles receive does need to grow in magnitude over time, and there's a lot of ways to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Stimulus, I think, is the word here.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we said, do you need to lift heavier to build muscle? And we said, no, but it's one of the ways you can. Because you can change the stimulus through the load that you're using,
Yeah,
but it's not the only way to change the stimulus.
correct.
And the reason why stimulus matters is the stimulus is straight up that signal that's telling your body adapt.
Yes.
The stimulus you give your body is the thing that provokes the adaptation, which in this case is muscle growth.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of an analogy. Do you have one off top? You're like analogy king. Do you have an
Oh,
analogy?
geez, putting me on the spot here. I don't. I
Okay.
gotta say, I don't. Maybe I'll think of one, but
I have a really, I feel like this is so basic, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. Um, if I'm, driving my car down the street, the signal, if the light changes red, it's gonna tell me to stop, right? If the
Mhm.
light changes green, I'm gonna go. And so the stimulus is kind of like that. It's your signal, and it's telling you go build muscle. It's the green light, and we want to make sure we're giving our body the green light to build. That's essentially what
Okay,
we're trying to do.
we'll
I
take
think it's
that.
like that.
We like using
But
car analogies,
we like analogies. It just makes it
and especially
makes
car
sense.
ones. Yeah,
Cars, yeah, I
it's
know.
good. Yeah.
I think the one thing though is like if you let's say you're trying to get to like a further destination, and muscle growth takes time. We got to cover some distance, right?
Yes.
One green light is not going to get you all the way there,
Aha. Yeah.
right? You need multiple green lights in a row to get to your final destination. And so that's what I wanted to say is like it's provoking an adaptation through stimulus, but there's no one green light that makes the journey. It's all
I
of them
like
combined.
I like that. It's kind of like you're gonna have, let's say, hundreds of green lights in the journey that you need to get to your destination, and each workout is like one green light, or each set, or whatever you want to say, right? I think people also underestimate like how long putting on heaps of muscle takes, I guess, if
Mm-hmm.
you want to gain like a lot of muscle. And you got to kind of give your body this a new stimulus, adapt from that stimulus, give it a progressive stimulus again, adapt. But also that doesn't mean that we necessarily every single session we need to increase the weight or improve form or add a rep.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's also something you got to think about is me, let's say I'm benching, I don't know, 220 pounds for 10 reps or whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I did that this week doesn't mean that in order to get a progressive stimulus or a stimulus that's going to tell my body to grow muscle doesn't mean I have to then do 225 for 10 reps, right?
Mm-hmm.
That same stimulus can still be promoting an adaptation even with a repeat performance. So
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that every single week we have to be improving. It just means over the long run we do want to be giving somewhat of a increasing stimulus.
Right. Like it's not like every light we come to is going to be a green light. Like sometimes we're going to go yellow and just make it through, or sometimes it's going to be red and then the next one will be green. And sometimes there's a stop sign in between, right? Like it's not always going to be this continuous linear I'm increasing all the time. And especially as you get more advanced, it becomes more challenging to make those rapid changes, right?
Yeah. At the beginning, newbie gains, you can pretty much increase your performance every single week linearly for several months.
Mm-hmm.
At my stage in the game, this is going to sound insane, so I'll say it twice. Some of my lifts have actually gone down over the years. I'll say that again. Some of my lifts have actually gone down over the years. And you might be like, what the heck? That doesn't make any sense. But if you go and look at my training videos from when I was younger compared to now, if you see the technique and the level of intention that I train with now compared to back then, the form is considerably better. So that's why we can't just look at the number on the bar because you might be like, I'm getting weaker, but I'm way more jacked objectively than I was back then. So how does that make sense? It's because I'm actually putting a better stimulus on the muscle and training with better intent. I have my other boxes checked. Whereas before, the number on the bar might have been higher, but the stimulus on the muscle could have been lower or net the same or whatever.
I think that's a prime example where lifting heavier is not more gains, right? To go back to our key question is like, do you need to lift heavier to build muscle? It's like, no, because if all you're doing is chasing the load on the bar or whatever, the load on the dumbbells or increasing the pin on the machine, whatever your choice of weight is, then you could easily be actually neglecting the stimulus, which is the thing that provokes that adaptation.
Yes. Yeah. So it's kind of like when we're talking about adding weight, I think we need to say, given other variables the same. You know what I mean? It's like given same technique, given same rest times, given same tempo, like all these things, then if we are able to increase rate, probably means that we're building muscle. Again, also for creating the correct environment with good sleep, good surplus, good protein, like those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think we need to talk about like going back to the role of stimulus. Essentially, the way I think about it, and please build on this, is we create a stimulus every time we work out, and that is a stress on the body. And then we need to recover from that. But then stress and recovery naturally provokes adaptation, right? We recover from a stress factor and we know our body is more conditioned. Here's a better analogy. It's like your immune system, okay? You build immunity the more you confront stress through every single cold season, right? You start to build immunity for those strains of cold. And it's the same thing. We're building up our immunity with certain stimulus, which in this case is a good thing because that immunity means, hey, I can hit this weight at this reps, this technique, no problem. I'm ready for the next level. We can think about provoking muscle growth as an adaptation to a stressor in the same way that we're building up our immune systems.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So if we're trying to think about what do we need to focus on then? We need to focus on stimulus because that's going to create, I'm going to say this cycle again and again, but focusing on the stimulus is what creates the stress that allows us to adapt to build muscle. So let's talk about how we focus on that stimulus. Because again, is it just weight? Are we just adding weight? If not, how else can we actually create that cycle of stimulus, stress, recovery, adaptation? That's the cycle we want to create. If it starts with stimulus, load on the bar, weight, that's one way to do it. What else can we do?
So yeah, we just talked about adding weight or adding load to lifts. But the other thing we mentioned was technique, right? So that's why I think always start with a good foundation of technique. And even as you continue to add weight, still check yourself on the technique because sometimes we get a little bit excited and we start playing the game of chasing the logbook, I like to call it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, ooh, what can I add this week, right? Which is great. I love that mindset. Let's gamify it. But every once in a while, especially when you touch a new weight, like for example, on my RDLs, I touch a new weight. This week, I'm not going to try to go 370 or add a rep. I'm going to say, let me repeat that performance and make sure that my technique is really good. So if you are improving technique over time, you are also improving the stimulus you're giving on your body. Okay. So that's a major one. The other one obviously is adding reps. Okay. So if we are able to add reps over time, amazing. We are increasing the stimulus that we're putting on our muscles. The other one that I know Courtney was mentioning before to me was even amplifying the intensity in some way, shape, or form. So like if you're hitting the same set, but maybe now I'm adding partials at the end of a set for some reason, we are technically amplifying the stimulus that we're putting on, let's say I'm doing bicep curls and before I just did a set of 10 with no partials and now I'm adding partials, technically elevated the stimulus. So like little things like that, there's some nuances there. Or you know that you are improving if the same weight, doing the same reps with the same technique feels easier than it did the previous week or the previous week before. That is a sign that progressive overload is happening. If the same performance feels subjectively easier, on a scale of 1 to 10, the RP scale or whatever, it feels like lower on that scale.
Yeah, if like cranking out, I'm going to use your example of your RDLs, right? You said you did 365, crazy, for 7, right? And if I asked you what was your RPE being rate of perceived exertion, how hard did you feel it was? And if you were like, oh, Court, it was a 9, I'd be like, all right, that's pretty tough. If, next week you locked in your technique, which is your game plan, the week after, you're like, cool, technique feels great. 3 weeks from now, I ask you, and you're still hitting 365 for 7. But now I asked you, okay, Paris, what did it feel as an RPE? And you're like, felt like a 7. That is definitely an improvement because your body has adapted to be able to achieve that performance with less exertion.
Exactly. I like it. Great.
Amazing. So if we're thinking about our core question that we're answering today. Do you need to lift heavier to build muscle? Short answer is no. You don't need to. It is one way, one way you can change that stimulus to create adaptations, but you can also do so through adding reps and through changing your intensity and through improving your technique.
Yes, exactly.
So think about all those things working together. I will say for me, I think my favorite way is actually through adding reps. There's something psychologically, I guess, approachable about that. I'm like, I just got to add one rep, right? And like you said, it's not, hey, I'm chasing it and then I'm going to sacrifice my technique. But it's like, I check in with myself in my set being like, can I do it? I know last week I hit 11. Can I do 12 this week? And I've also found that for clients, it's a really easy way for them to find progress. Because I think sometimes if people are chasing heavier weights too, it becomes easier to slip up on technique, or to be maybe a little bit more conscientious about injury because you're now sacrificing technique. But when you're just adding a rep, it kind of actually feels like the easiest way to test that progress, right?
Yeah.
Just one more rep.
There's no right or wrong answers. I would say the lower your rep range is, the more practical it might be to add a little bit of load, the lowest increment of load. And then the higher rep ranges, maybe it's more practical to add a rep.
Yeah.
That's what I would say typically. Because if you think about it, if I'm hitting a all-out set of 3, for example, adding a rep, if you think about what kind of magnitude of performance improvement that is.
33% performance improvement.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
If I add, a 2.5 pound on each side, more approachable. On the flip side, if I'm doing 15 reps, adding a 16th, that's not a significant percentage improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it's what, 7% or something like that versus 33%.
Yeah.
That was my immediate sense of math, but
that would be pretty good if that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it? Should we check? Let's test. Let's see. 16 divided by 15. Yeah, 6.6%. 7.
Nice.
Round up 7. Not bad. Electra, I know you're listening. My best friend and Team Truth member, Electra, I know you're listening. She's a math teacher. You should be proud of me.
Electra gets shout out in every podcast.
She does, because she listens to every podcast too. So
yeah, that's why I shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes. So thinking about it as what is this as a relative increase in performance?
Yeah.
And that can help you understand when it makes sense to try to add weight versus try to add reps. The classic example is anybody who's tried to do dumbbell lateral raises and your gym has 10s and it has 15s. Okay. That is the most humbling progression ever, because you're hitting the 10s and you're like, easy peasy, I can do 12. And then you pick up the 15s and that's a 50% increase on a small muscle group. That's considerable, right? So in that case, makes sense to maybe think about adding reps.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of practical implications to this. That's why it's not always just okay, am I lifting heavier and am I lifting heavier and am I lifting heavier, right? So yeah, I like this conversation though. I think this is good. I think there's a value in this. Yeah.
I want to go back to where we started around how this actually works in practice for the purpose of muscle growth. You made a really good point around how people chase progressive overload because they think it's the thing that unlocks growth, but it is actually more of a measure of growth. It's kind of that output of the adaptations that you've made. Can you talk through that a little bit more, just to kind of make sure that now that we've covered, here are all the ways you can progress in the gym and to build muscle. Let's connect it back to that original thought.
Yeah, it's kind of like leading versus lagging indicators, right? But I don't know, people... They know there's this concept of progressive overload that gets highlighted a lot, but then it ends up being a chase, right? And I think all the nuances that we just talked about and the practical implications that we just talked about should give you rise to know that it's not just always about the weight on the bar. For those reasons, it is a component that you definitely need to think about, and you should definitely be tracking your lifts. But it's not like we're forcing always just to lift heavier and heavier and heavier, especially as somebody who's physique oriented, not like a strength athlete or something like that.
Right. Yeah. If you're a power lifter, then of course, the weight on the bar is kind of your measure of success.
Yeah.
But we're talking specifically about growing muscle.
And I also do want to highlight, your body weight will fluctuate in your fitness journey purposefully or non-purposefully. But if you're chasing fitness goals, you're purposefully fluctuating your body weight. So it's not cool for me to say, oh man, when I was 200 pounds, for example, I'm never going to be 200 pounds, but let's say I was, and I'm comparing myself to then when if I cut to 170, and I'm like, damn it, I can't press the same amount of
Mm-hmm.
weight. It doesn't mean that I'm losing muscle or I'm failing at making gains. Especially if I enter in a building phase from 170 to 180, I'm like, oh man, still can't press the same weight I did when I was 200. Doesn't mean that I'm not making gains. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's all relative also to your body weight and the context that you're in. So you need to realize that.
It's the concept of relative strength, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So absolute strength is how much can I lift for how many reps? Relative strength is how much can I lift for how many reps given my body weight,
Mm-hmm.
relative to body weight. So that's why when you see that massive dude at the gym that's like, oh, you can't even bench 225, you're a wimp. It's like, but they're like 250 pounds and you're like 150 pounds. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you might be relatively actually the same strength level.
Yeah.
So that's why it's kind of comparing apples to oranges, and you can't compare your numbers in a building phase when you're pushing much higher body weight compared to another building phase when you're at a lower body weight. So, anyways, just more nuances to think about.
Mm-hmm. Just as you said, more nuances, but another reason why chasing the load on the bar isn't always the best indicator of success
Yeah.
with muscle growth or even with strength sometimes, right? I want to tile this together with this concept of consistency. Because everybody out there in the fitness world is like, yeah, consistency is key. I don't know how many Instagram captions I've seen that are just like, consistency is key over and
I
over
might
and
be
over again.
guilty. I might be
What's
guilty
that?
of that. Just joking. Said I might be guilty of that.
Oh, I'm sure we're both guilty of that at some point. I'm just saying, it's said over and over again for good reason. Consistency unlocks all progress. But I want to give it specific purpose in this conversation because consistency is the thing that allows those adaptations to happen, allows
Mhm.
you to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again to build muscle. And the same thing over and over again doesn't always mean chasing the next thing. Doesn't mean
Mhm.
always chasing the heavier weight. Doesn't even always mean chasing more reps or more volume or whatever it is. I think progressing at the same thing over time is where it's lucrative, is where we see the rewards. So, to tie that into our question for today, do you need to lift heavier? The answer is no, because at the same time, if you're lifting heavier, but you're changing things up every week, or you're testing one rep max and then you're not doing,
Yeah.
consistency in terms of how many reps you're doing each week, and you're not sticking to the same number of sets and reps each week, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So don't let that desire for heavier loads get in the way of your ability to execute consistently, because the consistency is not only the thing that sets your baseline, which allows you to then measure progress, it's also the thing that gives you those consistent green lights over and over and over again on your journey to growing muscle.
Yes. I love that. That's a really great point. Not to add major nuances in addition to what we've already been talking about, but even though mechanical tension and increasing the stimulus via the ways that we mentioned is the main way or key driver of hypertrophy, there are also ways that have nothing to do with that. Like, for example, like metabolite accumulation via methods like we'll call them like pump work.
Mm.
So, for example, even like if anybody's heard of blood flow restriction training, you use extremely light loads for extremely high reps. You're not really chasing much progression, but it's still a stimulus to your muscles
Mm.
to grow. So just wanted to highlight that as well, or like same muscle group superset. So like a chest press into a chest fly,
Right, where you're
chest
carrying
fly into a
fatigue.
chest press,
Yeah.
where you're challenging the muscle in a slightly different way, which still does give a signal to growth, but it's not via the
Mhm.
mechanism of mechanical tension.
Right. So if you had to say to somebody who's wondering, do I need to add weight to the bar? Do I need to add load? Do I need to lift heavier to build muscle? What would you leave them with?
I would say no, but it is a good idea for to make that the goal.
Mm-hmm. Make
Because
it the goal, right?
if you keep all variables the same, and at the beginning of, let's say, this training phase, you're doing 10 pounds for, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, 10 reps or something, and then as you progress, then you're doing 20 pounds for 10 reps, you're probably going to build muscle if you're good
Yeah.
nutrition, recovery,
Yeah.
etc. Right?
Because if you're able to do that,
Yeah.
if you're now able to lift heavier, chances are you have more muscle mass. And also, like, there's a neural connection, central nervous system component and
Ex-
all that, which
yes.
we won't get into. But you have created an adaptation, which is the indicator of progress. The fact
Mhm.
that you are able to lift heavier becomes the indicator that, hey, I've done the thing.
100%.
It's not
And
provoking
well,
the thing, it's the indicator you've done the thing.
Exactly. Just like we talked about. It's
Mhm.
like people have it kind of the reverse. But, the nervous system thing may be worth mentioning.
Mm.
Reason why at the beginning of the conversation, I made sure I mentioned, like, okay, I'm eating a slight surplus, I'm eating enough protein, I'm sleeping, and I'm training in a hypertrophy rep range is because your nervous system can adapt and you could have none of those boxes checked and you could still get very strong. Like there
Mhm.
are power lifters that are extremely strong in like the 1 to 3 rep range that are pretty small individuals
Mhm.
and don't actually have a lot of muscle mass just because their nervous system has adapted to such a high degree.
Yeah, a lot of those adaptations with our training actually has more to do with our nervous systems than with strength or muscle, right?
Yeah.
Like I will say, I know I've put on muscle in the last 6 years, but if I go back to a lift I haven't done in 3 years, I'm going to be weaker than when I was doing it every single week
Yes.
for months at a time because my neural connections
Your
and the
motor
neural
patterns, right?
synapses
Yeah.
are deconditioned, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Cool
Amazing.
conversation.
Okay. So if you are looking to put on muscle, looking at, your progress over time on load is great. Also consider how you can look at volume, specifically like if we're adding reps or your ability to do more volume over time. Your technique, please do not forget about your technique. And if you're doing any extra intensity training as ways that you can also evaluate, hey, I might be growing muscle. The main thing though is it's all about the stimulus. So chase the stimulus. Load is a great way you can achieve a better stimulus, but it's not the only way.
Yeah.
Anything you want to
Awesome.
add before we close out?
Nope. I'm all nuanced out.
Yeah, I know this is a complex topic. I hope
Yeah.
that we helped to make it feel a little bit more accessible and give you all some answers and things to look out for. But we say all this knowing that it's a lot more nuance than we can cover in this short amount of time. If you're feeling a little confused or you have more questions that got provoked from this conversation, don't hesitate to reach out. Drop your questions in a comment below. Send us a DM on Instagram. Let's chat about how we can keep you progressing in your own training to reach your muscle building goals. All right.
Awesome.
Without further ado, we will leave you for this week and we'll be back in your feeds with a brand new episode of Truth Talks next Monday. I'm Courtney. That's Paris. He's my brother. We're out for this week. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.